Hi, I'm Phil Gilbert. I'm retired head of design at IBM. At IBM, over the last decade, we've built the largest design team in the world. And I think more importantly, we have achieved the status of having more people adopting design thinking, which is our approach to problem framing and problem resolution, than anybody in the world. Today, we have over 250,000 design thinkers, and we have over 3,000 practicing designers at IBM looking at all sorts of problems and using the design method to attack those problems in very unique, innovative ways. Scaling anything is hard, and any kind of organizational change is difficult. When you bring in a new practice like the design method, or what's called design thinking, it's like bringing any new way of working, any new way of looking at things into any organization. It is as much about the content, the thing, as it is about organizational change management and organizational design. And so when we looked at how do we scale this notion of building a culture of design and design thinking at IBM, we really did spend at least half of our energy and resources on the programmatic change of people and how we behaved, as we did on the tactics of what that behavior was going to be. Let me make it a little bit more concrete. When we started this, we obviously had a company and an organization that needed, we felt, change. In essence, we were moving too slowly, and we weren't hitting the mark with the outcomes that we wanted. So we needed to change. And as we thought about this notion of outcomes and the outcomes that we wanted to generate, we really kept that in the foreground. The notion has never been to do some change for change's sake. And whatever the change is, in our case, it was bringing in this new capability called design thinking. Design thinking isn't the goal. The goal was to achieve better outcomes faster at scale. And so as we thought about how to do that, we realized that we needed to think about not the education of people in this new way of working, but actually about their adoption of these new practices. And that seems like a very kind of semantic thing. But when your goal shifts from educating people, spewing out content at people, when the goal changes to become those people's adoption of what you're talking about, you really have reframed the problem in a way that requires a very different approach. All of a sudden, we have to start understanding what motivates people. How do we measure behavioral change at scale? Things like that become the in-process markers that we have to start measuring, as opposed to the number of butts in seats that sat through some education session. That was kind of fundamental to how we approached this large-scale transformation change. And as we thought through, okay, how do we do that? What it meant was we actually have to show people that these methods work. The only way to do that is in the real world, start working squad by squad, team by team, using these new practices, but not just using them abstractly in an education setting, but actually using these practices in their real world work. Now, this takes longer and it's more hand to hand, but the way we did it at IBM, starting in 2013, which was the first year we started rolling this out, we picked just 7 teams. At IBM, our teams are fairly large bodies of people that actually, bring something to market, that actually affect change. They are multidisciplinary teams. And our teams are broken up into squads of people, about 10 to 12 people each. And so we worked, as I said, team by team, squad by squad. We picked 7 teams in that first year. It was only about 1,000 people or so. And we brought those teams into a workshop setting where we actually used these new practices, this design method, design thinking, we used these new practices to help them do the thing they were already doing better. And then we assigned mentors or coaches, if you will, to those teams for an extra 3 months, so that we actually worked with them for an ongoing 3 months after this very intense 1-week workshop to make sure that they were behaving, that they were using these, continuing to use these practices in their work, and also to make sure that their line superiors, the middle managers and the senior leaders above them, were actually also understanding how to reinforce the behaviors of this new way of working. So we did it team by team. We did that for the first 3 years until we had, in our case, until we had face-to-face impacted about 5,000 or 6,000 IBMers over the first 2.5 or so years. After that, we converted to a more digital strategy, and we started seeding the people from these 5,000. We started seeding them all around the company into other teams that hadn't yet adopted these practices. And from that 5,000, after the first 2.5 years, we achieved about 50,000 in the next 1.5 years. And over the following year or 1.5 years, we achieved from 50,000 to about 200,000. So it starts very slowly, very intentionally, and very hand-to-hand with a few key problems. And then once you get to some critical mass in the organization, then you can really start scaling it out very rapidly after that. I think that's a couple of the lessons learned there. Is in the early days, it requires patience on the part of the organization and the senior leaders. It requires the patience to know that we have to get the beginning stages very, very right. We have to communicate the wins from those early stages across the entire organization. And we had a complete communications strategy as a part of our rollout. And we had to make sure that the senior leadership not only stayed engaged and stayed supportive of the long-term change, but also reinforced that the behaviors of the teams that were under their command, under their control, in very tactical ways all throughout the process.